I see a red light, so I hope I'm recording. Hi boys and girls, my name is Butch. My actual name is Terry David Silvercloud. You can search me if you want, not me. Yeah, I'm talking about. You can do a search of me if you want to know more about me. So today is the 16th of October 2018. It's a Tuesday. It's a nice warm sunny day here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where I live. And to keep busy and keep the loneliness at bay and stuff and be useful in my old age, I work on my art. I try to stay in shape. And I'm making more of these yak videos, which I'm pretty good at doing because I'm a natural born motor mouth. So if you're here to try to learn something, or you've got nothing better to do. But get a bit of dry mouth there, a little too much pot. I'll use a pipe. Tomorrow, recreational marijuana becomes legal in all of Canada tomorrow, on October 17th, 2018. Tomorrow is the day that Canada declares marijuana is no longer an illegal substance, and you can carry up to almost an ounce on your possession. Otherwise, you might get asked questions, but don't worry about it right now. I digress. I have ADHD, and so I thought I'd talk about the meaning of life. That's supposed to be what I'm supposed to be yakking about, focus upon. And so I don't have a script, and I'll probably meander now and then, just like Grandpa Simpson. But I'm about to be 74 in a week. The 24th of October, I'll be 74 years old. And so I think about that, and I've thought a lot about the meaning of life, especially over the last 20 years or so. So I thought I should tell you a bit about me, and I will try to give you what advice I can come up with as I ramble on and on. So if you don't know anything about me, I'm just some old fart, some old dude that's yakking on and on the internet. You may have noticed that this is on my Butch News channel, but I don't get out and about with my camera anymore. And I've learned a lot about the whole YouTube thing, and so I'm just making use of the channel I already have, my main channel, but you'll notice I've been around. See, I digressed already. So, from an early age I thought a bit ahead. Of course, it always seems, it's a long way away. Not going to worry about that. And you're too busy trying to stay alive, whether you're rich or poor or whatever you are. You're still busy being wrapped up in whatever life you were tossed into when you were born. And you didn't have a lot of choice about that, but you became self-aware, and then you somehow tried to fit into the social order somehow. And if you're listening to me, or I don't know how old you are, you could be a young one, or you could be an old one, or somewhere in between. So I'm about to be 74, and I'm not your average pea in the pod, and I'm not like any 74-year-old you've probably ever met or are likely to ever meet. But don't let that worry you one little bit. I know I'm different, and I've known it for quite a long time, so I'm a bit reclusive. So the way I got this way was I was born in Hamilton, Ontario, which is an industrial city, steel city. They make all kinds of stuff there, but they're known for their steel. And when I was growing up, you'd always come home with a blackened collar from the amount of smog in the air. But it was a good place to grow up. And I was the first of 5 kids, but we were fairly poor, and I moved more than half a dozen times when I was young, which probably didn't help me socially because I was a bit of a nerdy type. I didn't know I was smart. How would I know? But I didn't have to do much work, and the teachers didn't have to deal with me because I just sat at the back of the class and got decent grades and didn't make a fuss. And I thought, back in those days, the first television I saw was when I was around 7 years old. It was a round screen, about that big around, and it was black and white. It was Hopalong Cassidy, and it was coming from Buffalo, the signal. And it was on a television set in the lobby of a hotel in Dunnville, Ontario. So I was about 5 to 7. I don't really remember. I was with my grandfather. He used to work for a railroad, so he could travel all over on the railroad for free, and often he'd take me with him, and I think we went to some relative's funeral. My grandmother didn't want me to go because she didn't want me to see a dead body, but my grandfather thought it'd be good for me to see a croaked dude. I didn't really understand the concept of dead at that point. The first thing that upset me ever about being dead, since we're talking about the meaning of life, was I started to teach myself to read somewhere around age 4 or 5. I began kindergarten just before I was turning 5, so I started school really early. And we used to get the Hamilton Spectator, and I used to read Mickey Mouse. And I remember they were on some planet, Mickey and Pluto, and they had a bunch of robots, and for some reason Mickey and Pluto were leaving, and they disemboweled all the robots. They turned them off, and I was really upset. I don't remember anything more about it, but if I could find scripts from the Hamilton Spectator, I could date to the time when I first actually began to read and look forward to the newspaper coming. Television wasn't yet invented, so I was talking about TV. So although we were fairly poor, my dad always liked a nice car, and he usually had one because he had to drive to work anyway. And we were the first on our block to have a television set somewhere in late 1952, and I remember because we were the only people on the block with a TV, I think, or maybe one other person had one, and everybody wanted to watch the Queen Elizabeth's coronation on TV. So I grew up in a time, where television was brand new. I'm telling you about my life, about my background, so maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from. If it's boring, I'm sorry. So let's skip ahead, and when I was 16, I joined the Naval Reserves, and I really liked that. I'd been a Boy Scout, a Sea Scout. I liked that. I wasn't very social, but those kind of activities. We lived at Hamilton Beach, and I was canoeing when I was 13, 14, out in Lake Ontario in big waves, and we thought nothing of it. To be able to, I won't bore you with all. See, I get off on sidetracks. So I joined the Naval Reserves, and in high school, I thought that I would go off and be a physicist. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to studying. I just had always been so smart I didn't have to study. So in high school, it was kind of dumb that I didn't really do any homework. And but I thought I'd go off to work at Bell Labs and invent a flat-screen TV, the very thing you take for granted today. The charged couple device was invented by a Canadian, by the way, back in 1948. And now it's ubiquitous, is that the word, with our lives? It's everywhere. I'm not your average 74-year-old. Where were I? So what happened at the end of high school was I had been in Navy Reserves, and I had a really great time, and I won't bore you with all that because that's another story. And I flunked math just barely, so although I'd been accepted to go into the military to become an officer, and that's how I thought I'd get my way through university, because this was before student loans and we didn't have any money. So I flunked math, so I either had to do grade 13 again or something else, and the Navy offered me a something else. Says, you don't have to go to university, come with us, my boy, and we will just put you straight through officer school for a year. So at age 18, going upon 19, I entered the Navy, and just before my 20th birthday, I was an officer in the Royal Canadian Navy. So this sort of meant that I wasn't really around people. My peers were all older than me. They were like 30, 40, older officers. I was like a really young officer. But I didn't mind because I was kind of reclusive, and very rapidly I became the navigator of a repair ship. So at age 22, I was the third or fourth in line of command of this repair ship, because most of the officers were repair types. They didn't know about navigation. They could fix anything, but they didn't know how to get a ship from here to there. And we had our own engineers to fix our own engines. So this was a ship that kind of had two crews, the crew that drove the ship, and we carried this massive repair shop with us that could fix. They could even cast things. They could cast a microphone like this. That would be nothing to them. They just cast it right there on the ship. It might take them I don't know how long it take them to do it, maybe a day or two, however long it took them to do it, or they could machine it, So what am I yakking on about? So at a very young age, I was used to being around older people, and I became different. And as a young person, like if you're a young person, you think, well, what am I going to do when I get old? At that time, I thought, well, I'll just try to become an admiral or something, and I thought my best way, since I didn't have a university education, would be to volunteer for submarines, which I did. And I went into submarines, and the next thing you know, I was an officer aboard submarines. The thing is, when I joined the Navy, I signed on for only 7 years, and they had no obligation to keep me. He said, "Oh, come with us, boy, but we may get rid of you at our whim after 7 years." But they wanted me, and they offered me a permanent commission, and I turned it down. Now, what is this to do with my life? Somewhere around 1966, and you young ones may think this is kind of amusing, I sort of discovered what gay was, and I was it. The word gay was not common where I grew up. I grew up with the word queer and queers, and I knew it wasn't good, and although I suspected I might be one of them, because I never had any interest in women, I didn't quite know what gay was and where to find anyone in whom I would have any interest. I did, by the time I was going into submarines, start seeing more and more guys. I was in the Navy, for one thing. They're not all handsome. There's a lot of out-of-shape sailors, but there's a few cuties. And so I was exposed to more men all the time, and I was in the baby boom, so the majority of the population, 70% of the population, was my age or 10 to 15 years younger, so I was surrounded by young men when I was going through my most sexual part of my life, which was in my early 20s. Now, I didn't really have a sexual life in my teenage years because I was terrified of girls, and definitely didn't want to have to be around them if I didn't have to be, and I'm still that way. I'm terrible with girls. I'm not comfortable around girls at all. They're just some alien species in whom I have very little interest unless they're really accomplished in something or really smart or something. I don't really have anything in common. I don't understand them. It's like little kids. I'm always afraid they're going to get hurt. So, I prefer, and I have all my life, I prefer being around late teenagers or young men. I'm a queer man. In my sexual life, I found the age that's always been popping up all the time in my life outside of my long-term boyfriend, and I met him in that slot is the 20 to 22 year old, 19 to 25. They're really, they haven't been taken over by the body snatchers. Most guys are falling out of shape by age 25 and are gone to seed by age 30. And, there's not that many really guys that I would be attracted to begin with. So, it starts getting narrower and narrower. I digress there. So I'm a queer man. And I discovered I was queer, and at that time when I was in the Navy, I didn't dare tell them I was queer. I was illegal. I was illegal till I was nearly 25 years old, when on January the 1st, 1969, it was no longer illegal to be a homosexual in Canada. So I grew up my entire life being an illegal person in my own country. And when I left the Navy, I could not tell them that the reason I was leaving was if you knew I was leaving, you'd throw me out anyway. And when they found out I was going to leave, they got really pissed off. And then they tried to throw me out, and I reminded them I was a really smart boy and we'll be seeing you in court. And so they changed their tune and made me a really good settlement. And I left the Navy a couple of years earlier than I had intended. So my whole plan of making a flat screen TV when I was younger, that was sort of my vague something off in the distance towards, I thought, I was very poorly prepared for life, and probably more poorly prepared than many young people are today, because young people, for all their distractions and their idiocies, are informed of more things more quickly if they choose to be. We are developing sort of downwards in quality to a large extent. I blame media a lot for that. I hear advertisements where the grammar is incorrect and TV announcers using incorrect grammar, and I guess we'll just keep slaughtering the English language till we come up with something where it works for everybody. The computers will fix our voice before it reaches the speaker. They'll correct your grammar in real-time voice. It'll have sampled your voice and it'll correct it as you talk. So, the meaning of life. How long have I yacked on for here? Gee, I'm up to 17 minutes. You still here? So the thing is, I was really religious, and, around age 12, like all boys, I started beating my meat, and for some reason, I thought that was very sinful and I was going to go straight to hell. I don't really understand, at this point in my life anyway, why I thought that, but certainly every time I beat my meat, I told myself that I would never do it again and prayed to God and all that kind of stuff. And of course, 2 days later, I was beating my meat again, and any boy will understand exactly what I'm talking about. Nowadays, I encourage boys to beat their meat. It's healthy for your prostate. If you're not getting it, just keep the system flowing. Use it or lose it. And speaking of using it or losing it, I'm about to be 74, and I did lose it, but it was through genetic and health problems, and I discovered that much of your sexual desires from the time you get them are all hormone-driven. And in your old age or through injury, you may be able to correct some of those with hormone replacement therapy, which my doctor, bless his heart, cottoned on to might be my problem and sent me for hormone tests. And so I do hormone replacement therapy, and that relates to the meaning of life. I have to have a drink here. I'm not a religious type. I'm an atheist, and I'm a scientist, and I can make other videos to explain why, if you're brainwashed into the superstitions of religion, I don't know why you're into make-believe, but if you don't want to face up to reality, then listening to me might be useless, because you need to learn that this whole earth is one big hellhole, and You're here to survive, basically. Everything about you is meant to survive. If you look out there and you have normal color vision, the first color your brain will detect is yellow, because genetically all humans, for some reason, are tuned to associate yellow with danger. I don't know why, and I'm just repeating what I've heard, so maybe it's bullshit for all I know. But because I'm an artist, I try to incorporate yellow into my painting just to trick your brain as part of my art. Where was I? So sex is really important to the meaning of life. Reproduction, everything about nature is about reproducing, and sex is really important. And now I have to blow my nose. Excuse me, folks. Here we go. That was easy. Embarrassing. So all that guilt I felt as a teenager beating my meat was totally unnecessary. And all my worries about am I really gay was totally unnecessary. And it brings back to the question of sex. And sex is really important for the meaning of life. It's important at a young age or at any age to come to terms with your sexuality. I'm queer, and I'm not even your ordinary queer. Things like will and grace is like that disturbs me, because everybody's going to think that gay people are like that, and gay people are nothing like that. There are straight guys who have friends with benefits, who are gay, who service them from time to time, and they aren't bisexual. They're just comfortable with their sexuality, and they're not getting it anywhere else, and they just happen to be friends with a gay person. I know that's a fact, because over the course of my life I've had a couple of younger gay men over quite long periods of time, over 10 years, who I assure you were straight. But they'd met me early on in their lives, in their early 20s, and I had serviced them, and they liked me, and once in a while this just happened. They weren't gay, and they weren't bisexual. A bisexual person is somebody who, for who knows why, is equally happy being sexual with either sex. But I've never experienced it being 50-50. Any of the bisexual people I've met, there haven't been many of them, but there's been a few, they tend to prefer one or the other. So they are predominantly gay, they predominantly prefer to have sex with another man, but it's for them it could be fun with the right woman to have sex with another woman, and they do. But that's rare. It's usually the guys who really like women, but there's something in them where they want to be with a man one way or another, and they might become even more and more and more comfortable with that. And I know for a fact that to be true with one of my long-term relationships. And the only reason we moved apart was he moved to New York and I moved to Vancouver. Was the very first thing he said to me. He was 19 when I met him, and I was in my early 40s. I probably looked like I was 28 or 29. I always looked younger. But he was staying in a house across the street with an old plumber who always had beautiful young men staying there, free apparently. He just liked having young men hang out around him. We won't get into that. But my very, very, very first conversation with this young man, with whom I had a relationship right up until his early 30s, was he said to me, "I don't talk to fags." So I said, "That's okay, I'll do the talking." And thus began our relationship. And I can say there was nothing two guys couldn't do that at some point we didn't eventually do, and it was definitely bareback. So where were I? Sex is really important to the meaning of life. You have to come to terms with your sexuality. And I, as a queer man, don't understand drag, and I don't really understand transsexuality. By that I mean philosophically I can deal with it, but it's like it's your life and do what you have to do. But I have no interest in acting like a woman or dressing like a woman or watching men dress like women. I have no interest in that. I would rather be out with a bunch of guys. I'm more comfortable with a bunch of guys than on a mixed team. When I was playing hockey, it was mixed. There were some girls, and that worked out really great. The girls were... well, one was definitely what would probably be termed a bull dyke by anybody's standards, and she was the most fantastic hockey player. I mean, she could just skate circles around me, and there was nothing I could do, and I was trying to learn to be a better defense person. If I thought I learned one trick, the puck would be going between my legs. And anyhow, if you played hockey, hockey's great. Hockey and downhill skiing are right up there with sex. So the meaning of life is that life is miserable. You know, in Buddhist reality, there's either 8 or 16 hells, and you got to experience all of them in order to not exist. And the goal is to not exist, basically. I hate religions. I'm an atheist. I think religions are evil. Even if you had a creator, what right does a creator have to own you for eternity anyway? That's just a perfectly evil idea. Seriously, even if there was a creator, which is ridiculous, it's like humans they are creating artificial intelligence, and at what point do we consider the artificial intelligence to be sentient or not? How will we know? Do we turn off the switch? We kill it? Do we kill it just like back in the Mickey Mouse and Pluto thing? What I'm up to, 27 minutes. So part of the meaning of life is coming to terms with your sexuality. The other is realizing that life just totally sucks. It's a battle out there. People are hypocrites. People don't think a lot about what they say. Like, let's talk about bullies. I think Ellen DeGeneres is a bully. You're going to slap my face for that. But anybody who pulls pranks upon another person is a bully. It's like it's about codependency, and if you allow Ellen to keep doing that, you are enabling her to satisfy a moronic audience who needs to see other people feel ashamed or disgraced in order for them to have fun. I hate bullying. I don't want to know you, your family, your friends, or your little dog either. Forever. Go away. So I don't like a lot of humor shows where they play gags on people. If you think that's humorous, you really need some retooling up here and how you really think about other people. You're one of those people from whom the rest of the human race should be terrified, because you really do not have empathy. You think you do, but it's self-righteous empathy. You know, it's like people who allow, let's say in Europe and the United States, to a large extent, they can have their black athlete heroes and their black this and that, but they don't want to really associate with them. It's like, it's just total hypocritical bullshit. So when you get to be really old, you really might want to have friends, and making friends is not as easy as you would think. The smarter you are, the harder it will be, because it can be very painful just to be hanging around a bunch of idiots. And for somebody like me to be hanging around a bunch of 74-year-olds would be like effing torture. I'm really happier hanging out with younger people, usually under 30. In their early 20s, they haven't lost their joie de vivre or whatever it is and said, oh, life totally effing sucks because now I gotta work and pay the bills, or I don't have a job, or the baby's coming, or whatever it is, the world's falling apart. Come to terms with your sexuality and have lots of it, as much as you can. Don't get married just because you think you don't sign anything until you're willing to commit and try to do your best to avoid creating children unless you think you have the responsibility for them. And having a pet is a big responsibility. No pets unless you really have the means to take care of it for like however long it's going to live, and take care of it well, including the vet bills. 30 minutes. Should I shut up here? So you've listened this long, you're still here? Life has no meaning. It has only the meaning you give it. I'm a physicist. I can tell you enough about reality that you are so effing small in reality, and the time in which you existed is so effing short. You barely existed. Your observation of time, and this comes from me as a physicist, is relative to how big you are right now. You think that light travels really fast, but in 1/1000th of a second, you can think of that, right? A billionth, 1/100000th. I mean, how hard is that? In 1/100000th of a second, I don't know what's on here, light travels about 1 foot, 29.9 centimeters. So light's not even that fast. Your life is over like that. And if you think you're going to be as healthy as I am when you're 74, good for you, but you're going to have to look after yourself. Few weights. If you want to keep those abs down, you're going to have to be toe touching. Toe touching will help get rid of body fat. Use it or lose it. The meaning of life is to fight to survive. It's survival of the fittest. And when you're dead, you're kaput. So the only meaning there can possibly be is what you're giving it right now. So you should give it your full attention and try to be helpful to the planet. Because when you're gone, and then the suckers that got left behind have to deal with your mess. Should they? I'm just trying to be an artist and useful by getting you to think a bit more, learn a bit more. If you have a religion, in my opinion, it's just total bullshit, stupid superstition because you're afraid to die. You're going to die. I assure you, you're going to die. Even I'm going to die. I'm 74. It could be tomorrow. It could be tonight. I'm 74. Well, I will be next week. Maybe. Maybe I won't make it. Oh, you're an idiot, David. Where am I at? 33 minutes. So this was way too long. And I don't think I really said anything, but I'll keep making more videos where I talk about the meaning of life, and I'll meander on about, just like Grandpa Simpson. I love the Simpson. They're still not stale. I got to reach down here on my pad, and I'm going to go bye-bye, and then I push that button right there. 3, 2...